Namaskar. Welcome to this first time discussion that we are going to lead about some aspects of the philosophy of Sri Sri Anandamurti. And we decided to just share our thoughts and hopefully have some of you join in or be interested in some of our activities and programs so that we can form a community of like-minded thinkers and debaters on various subjects and topics centered around the philosophy of Sri Sri Anandamurti. First of all, yes, we are in Nicaragua. It's one of the very interesting countries because it's one of, approved officially, the most triangular shape, and that reminded me of an aspect of our philosophy which is called Prama Trikona. It's a balanced triangle of forces, and yes, it's also reflecting on this country. Seems to be at this point, at this moment, still one of the most stable nations around the Americas. And we have some projects here. To my side is Dada Vita Shokananda. He is running a homeopathic clinic in the rural areas around Managua, about 40 kilometers, and it's a project where I started. My name is Dada Moksheshwarananda, and since the last almost 10 years I've been developing this project of a model unit, which is how we call it, master unit of giving an example for rural and new development in the future of society. So we like to start with reading an interesting passage of the philosophy of Sri Sri Anandamurti and just try to share our thoughts on it.
No two entities of this universe are equal in all respects or in any respect. This universe is a collection of a mesh of varieties. Diversity is the law of nature, and identity is not possible. Although theories, propositions, hypotheses, and different formulae or different formulae are the creations of different types of persons, they must not go against human psychology. One of the greatest treasures of human beings is rationality, and anything that goes against this human characteristic is bound to be eventually destroyed. The philosophies that human beings follow can be divided into 4 categories. 1. Dogma-centered philosophy. 2. Matter-centered philosophy. 3. Self-centered philosophy. And 4. God-centered philosophy. If a God-centered philosophy does not come forward immediately to fill this vacuum, some other ideology will, because it is a law of nature that something will fill a vacuum once it has been created. If this ideological vacuum is not filled, a great catastrophe will take place in the future because other defective philosophies will come forward. Some dogma-centered, matter-centered, or self-centered theories will occupy the space. We cannot allow this to happen.
So yeah, it's an interesting excerpt of a longer article which we will put a link below later on, and you can read it for yourself, the full article. And in short, we are talking about 4 types of philosophies. The most recent that kind of collapsed or at least broke in great parts is the matter-centered philosophy, which is communism, and we are referring here to the Soviet communism, which is basically only focused on matter and do not recognize any spiritual truths, any spiritual orientation of the human being. And that really was their downfall, and that is why it could not succeed for much longer. The next one was the self-centered philosophy, which is basically the opposite. In the capitalist world, everything is self-profit, motive for the self, and be free, as much free as you can be, to be able to pursue and accumulate more and more wealth, but it's to the detriment of other people. And then we have now the emergence of a dogma-centered philosophy, which is now in an obvious struggle. In the Middle East, we see it since many years, but now it has erupted in a new way. And hopefully, after all these philosophies will come to their end, the God-centered philosophy will be remaining and be the ultimate panacea for all humanity. But if we do not fill the space left open by various collapses of these philosophies, there is a danger that some other philosophy, which we've now hearing AI might be one of them, one of that kind of possibility that a super intelligent robotic style of super rational entity would take over, but we don't know who is going to dominate or who has programmed that sort of scientific device that will sometimes also be deceptive. Now let's have a look at the matter-centered philosophy. Is not only, in my opinion, the communist ideology as it was practiced in the Soviet communism, but I think the extreme focus on matter has also been very obvious in the recent pandemic. The pandemic, which only could be cured by some physical ingredient. And so we are all waiting to get that physical ingredient, the great savior, the vaccine, and everything else that could help us in between was being blocked. That is unfortunately, that's what we have been coming to know in the past few years, that subtle forms of treatment were practically not considered and up to the point of not allowed, because a self-centered philosophy jumped in, which is the capitalist philosophy trying to make profit out of this unfortunate incident of a spread of a disease, which we've seen in the last 3 years. And since Dalavita Shokananda is a medical doctor, he has been very much concerned about that in one way, that these basically, due to the influence of matter-centered and self-centered combined philosophies, that we've just relied on the physical remedies, while there are so many other subtle and even other methods of curing that disease out there. So yeah, and so unless we transcend these limiting concepts, these limited philosophies, and come to the conclusion that there is an all-round spiritual intelligence that guides us from within, only then will we be able to resolve many of our problems, including physical problems on this planet. So yes, we have a philosophy that can offer the combination of the two, which is an economics approach together with a spiritual and moral, based on spiritual and moral principles. So maybe you have some thoughts on this. Just share what your experiences in the last few years.
Well, it sounds familiar. Your thoughts, your thought process is familiar for me, because I remember in 1981 when I started medical school in Germany, I was completely convinced about the superiority of Western scientific medicine. But it did not take long, and less than 1 year later, in my second year of medical school, by accident, so-called accident, I discovered so-called homeopathy, a natural system of medicine, of healing people in a very, very different way. And a large part of homeopathy is so subtle that it really goes from material into the subtle, non-material and even spiritual plane. But I do not want to be dogma-centered, so until today I'm successful in combining homeopathy and other natural systems, more subtle systems of healing, with the good parts of Western or scientific medicine.
Sure, yeah, we should always be open for new inventions and for new discoveries in all fields. That's the only way we can progress. And yes, we are seeing the events unfolding at this moment, and yes, the dogma-centered influences are also very much prevalent, in that when we see a person with a white dress claiming to be a doctor of such and such department, immediately it comes, the confidence arises in our minds, and we accept what that person says, especially if there are numbers with comma 001. It seems to be, yeah, it has been very well researched and well elaborated, and certainly the experts must know. In many ways on our news we hear the experts say, and that immediately evokes a kind of compliance. Yes, what they say you cannot know, it's just they who know it. And unless the proof of their discoveries, of their statistics comes in a very understandable way, I am not ready to accept anyone who says something in this regard, just claiming to be a scientist. So in these times we have to be very careful, because the self-centered philosophy is permeating every aspect of a society, including the scientific world. Yes, we've known that studies are being falsified, they're being altered, and just to fit the needs of the commercial interests. So in that sense, it's a very normal development. We must not be so surprised about it. And in the Latino world, where we live here with the Spanish-speaking communities, they are very much acquainted with corruption, with bribes, with all this type of things, and in that way, nothing unusual about pharmaceutical companies or whatever business entities that are around in this world, dominating whole countries, whole continents, and just going over dead bodies to achieve their profits. Now, what can we do against it? We can only apply certain principles, which are, it's a big topic, how we can practically achieve this in our communities and form smaller economic units around certain zones, certain areas. But most of all, and even that would fail if we do not have that main ingredient or two ingredients, which is ethical principles and spiritual practices. If we do not have some spiritual practice that leads us closer and closer to this subtle understanding of the universe being a whole and a one entity, and if we do not have an understanding of ethical and moral principles how to not harm someone. Just by saying something in a wrong way, we can already harm. And that is many times not conscious. We are not conscious of that. Even buying an innocent t-shirt on the street, maybe supporting a sweatshop, God knows where it is. So these are the subtle interactions we must be aware of and know about before we do take decisions. And these ethical principles are not just simple: do not harm, tell the truth, and do not steal. It's much more complex than that. So I wish we can all, or I hope with this small interview here we can have you join us in our endeavor to spread these principles and animate and help people to adopt spiritual practices and more be free from dogmatic tendencies or unnecessarily materialistic viewpoints, and be open to practice that which we would define as a God-centered philosophy. Have anything to add? Any thoughts that might...
Yes, I strongly support this process that we should start now together, and together unitedly. I want to emphasize that we remind ourselves, or realize first of all, and then remind ourselves again and again, that if we can really embrace, accept, and make part of us our God-centered philosophy, it is so much easier and automatic that we can be ethical, moral, because then we can very easily see and remember that we are one big family. Not just my father and my mother in Germany, but my spiritual father, my spiritual parents, and all my brothers and sisters in all the countries of the world. We are one big human family. And then it's so common sense that we should help each other, love each other, and work together. And working together as one family, success is guaranteed, definitely. So much faster, so much sooner.
Well, thanks for these concluding words, and we will in future bring out specific topics on various things, and we keep you posted. Thank you.